Okay, so today we are talking about the second part of our series. We looked at rates for the first few videos. Now we are moving on to ratios. So we talked about rates as comparing to different quantities. So for example, distance with time, like with speed. Ratios compare two of the same quantities. So we can use this for regular numbers or any types of measurements, basically anything with some kind of quantity associated with it. So a lot of this is going to be a revision, kind of recap for what we were doing back a few years ago, but this comes up in the Standard 2 course, so it is important that we talk about it here. So let's just go straight into simplifying ratios. So we are going to simplify. Now this first part, we are going to simplify 24 to 18. So remembering that with ratios, we are just trying to get both of our two numbers in the smallest or simplest form, basically. So we want to find basically which number goes into both of these two parts of our ratio to make it an equivalent ratio. Same with equivalent fractions. So we want to see what goes into both 24 and 18. Now you can pause and have a go at this, but I can see that I can get to something simpler by dividing both of these numbers by 6. 6 goes into both 24 and 18. 6 goes into 24 4 times, and 6 goes into 18 3 times. So this is our simplest ratio here. For part B, let's compare three different quantities. So we've got, let's say, 16 meters to 12 meters to 20 meters. And now, since we have the same quantities, these different measurements here are going to all cancel each other out. So let's just rewrite this as a ratio. So we have 16 to 12 to 20. And I want to see what goes into each of these three numbers. Which same thing goes into all of these. Now, you can pause and have a go at this one, but with each of these, 4 will go into them. So I can divide 16 by 4, I can divide 12 by 4, I can divide 20 by 4. And once I do that, that's going to give me 4, 2, 3, 2, 5. This is my ratio. I've written the same thing, but just in a simpler form. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, part B, let's call it, is we want to express ratios in the form. So I'll write here, expressing in the form n to 1 or 1 to n. So basically just going with one of the parts of our ratio, dividing through until we get 1 as either of these, and the n is just going to be our other number. So this order doesn't really matter, but this is just different ways we can express different ratios. So it doesn't matter where they are on either side of this ratio sign. These two things are exactly the same. They're communicating the exact same information. So I want to, basically, for part A here, I want to express 25 to 10 in this form n to 1 or 1 to n. And what this involves is, because we want to get one of these down to 1, it's typically going to be the smallest number. So between these two, our 10 is the smallest number, and we want to get that to 1. And we can pretty easily do that. We can get any number to 1 by dividing it by itself. So I'm going to divide 10 by 10. That's going to give me 1. And I want to do the same thing to my other part of the ratio. Because remember, to make equivalent ratios, what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. In the same way we worked with equations or fractions as well. So once I divide 25 by 10, that's going to give me 2.5. And when I divide 10 by 10, that is going to give me 1. So this guy here is my n, basically. That is how we can simplify these ones in this particular way. Now let's do one more. So we'll go 16 to 24. Now we're going to look at the smaller number, which is 16, and we can divide both of these by 16. That will bring my 16 over on this left-hand side to 1, and the 24, once I divide it through, it will give me something else. So when I divide 16 by 16, that gives me 1. And when I divide 24 by 16, that is going to give me 1.5. Okay, so it doesn't matter which order we go through, it is going to basically give us an equivalent ratio with one of these things being 1. Now in this case, our n here was 1.5. Now another way to do this could be to divide the 24 by 24 and then divide 16 by 24. It doesn't really matter. As long as one of these things are 1, we've done and we've divided through correctly, then the question will, this is a valid way to answer one of these questions when we write it in this form. Okay, so for this next question, it's saying the ratio of boys to girls is 7 to 6. 354 girls are in the school, and we want to figure out how many boys there are. So basically for this, we want to set up an equivalent ratio here. So we're saying the ratio of boys to girls is 7 to 6. So we can say, because if you remember from a while back when we talked about ratios, we can set these up as fractions as well. So if we have the number of boys, a fraction of the number of boys over the number of girls, that is equal to the amount of boys I have, which is 7 over 6. So I can always set up this fraction when given some information. So I know that the ratio of boys to girls is 7 to 6. I can write that as a fraction like I've done over here. And then I can set that to be equal to some arbitrary fraction over here of just a number of boys and a number of girls. What this allows me to do though is that I can use a piece of information from the question. I'm told that 354 girls are in the school. So I'm trying to find at the end of the day, the number of boys, so this thing up here, when the number of girls is 354. So if I rewrite this, this is like saying number of boys over 354 equals to 7 over 6. And now I just have an equation that I can solve. So now that I have this, I can just make the number of boys the subject. And I can do so by multiplying both sides by 354. Okay, and once I do that, I get the number of boys as being equal to 7 over 6 times 354. And that gives me 413 boys. Now, a good way to check your answer is if you put this 413 back into this fraction, so you substituted it into here, and you put that into your calculator, it should simplify to give you 7 over 6. Okay, one more question here. We are looking at dividing a quantity in a given ratio. So let's consider this question here. So we're dividing an inheritance, 24,000, between two people in the ratio of 2 to 3, and we want to decide how much each person will receive. Now, with ratios, like I did with the previous question, if I were to draw this up, I would get, for example, I'm representing this ratio 2 to 3 with these different colored boxes here. So I've got 2 parts red, 3 parts orange. So we want to think, how many parts in total? this is what we actually want to divide by in order to get to splitting this up and dividing in a ratio. So how many parts all together? So we can count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts all together. So to divide this into the ratio, I just need to simply add the 2 parts in my ratio itself. 2 and 3 give 5. And then I can figure out how much will be in one part by just dividing my amount of money into 5. That'll give me one of these parts in here, which can really simply be made and split up into this ratio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 24,000, so I can say that one part equals 24,000 divided by 5. And once I do that, I get 4,800. So $4,800 makes up one of these parts. So the person that's getting the 2 parts, all I do is I take this $4,800 and I times it by 2. So I do 4,800 times by 2, and that is going to give me 9,600. And then to find my 3 parts, this second part of my ratio, I take my 1 part, 4,800, and I multiply it by 3. And that's going to give me 14,400. So I have split this up into this ratio. So 2 parts being 9,600 and 3 parts being 14,400. These are the 2 values I get here when I divide my amount of money in this particular ratio. And a good way to sense check these types of questions is once you get your 2 values, 9,600 and 14,400, add the 2 values together and you should get the amount that you were given in the question. In this case, that was 24,000. That brings us to the end of ratios. Hopefully this was just a little bit of a recap for what we've been doing previously in school, but this will give us a good head start into some of the later things we'll be doing in this course. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.